Accessible Web.
Well, welcome, Hope. Thank you for joining today. This next component was user submitted, which is really, or viewer submitted. Things to note before we audit a component. So first off, this audit does not represent all the steps we typically perform during a manual audit. We've selected a few steps of our manual audit process that are a great place to start when looking at the accessibility of a component. The point of auditing these components today is to provide feedback and support orgs and companies in making improvements to their accessibility. It is not to show them in a negative light. So last note is if you feel like checking out our platform ramp, which depending on the plan can also get you access to our guided audit tool, but primarily is used for monitoring your platform, scanning using Xcore at whatever WCAG level you intend to reach. Also, if you do perform a manual audit or have us do a manual audit, it's a great way to organize your tasks. Um, all right, now I'm all set. I'll hand it off to you, Hope. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. All right, so we're looking at this SVG wheel component for Sage Dental. So it looks like with this guy, you can click on a wedge and it opens up content over here on the right. And it also looks like there are different states for this relating to contrast. So it's a darker kind of state for whenever something is selected. So definitely this is not a typical image. So let's go ahead and dive in using the picture and images. So it looks like our scanner isn't picking up the specific wedges within. So that means it's going to be a little bit harder on the auditor's part, but not impossible. All right, so let's go ahead and open up the dev tools. Okay, so this does look like a pretty hefty SVG. So it's a lot more flexible depending on your screen size. And also you can add interactive components a part of an SVG. So that's how this component is able to, act as a button and open up that content. And it also, whenever we're looking at this, we can see how things are resizing, which is another good point. Okay, so I would go ahead and place this within the complex images because it is an image, but it also has components that have text and as well as it is interactive for the user. So we typically, as you can see in the guided audit tool, we define complex images as like infographics or programmatically related descriptions are needed for these types. So this is definitely something that we're going to be looking for. So first things first, this is a meaningful, so it definitely is going to need alt text for each of these different sections. And it looks, I'm also going to try to see, the one thing that is kind of a disadvantage when it comes to SVGs is it's a little bit harder to break up specific sections, as we can clearly see right here. So it looks like this section. All right, so we have all of the path information. I'm not entirely sure that we can add. This is probably coded more with JavaScript or another interactive library like React or something to that extent. But when you're doing a accessibility audit, we don't go quite into JavaScript and the more interactive languages. We're looking main for how the HTML and CSS work with assistive technologies as well as making sure that everything is communicating its role properly to assistive technology. So something that I would definitely do with this one is turn on my screen reader. Fortunately, I don't think I can do that and have you guys hear it, but see what is being communicated for these individual sections. But definitely, it's looking like there is a title for it, but not necessarily for each section. So that's definitely something that I would add a failure for, is to make sure that each section is described properly. So if somebody is looking at this and using assistive technology, they can differentiate the different sections, especially for non-visual users. All right, so so I would definitely add a complex image failure so that you can add descriptions for the specific sections. Um, the other thing is that this is also an example of images of text. So that would something definitely need to be in the descriptions for each section. So a lot of these picture and images tests kind of go hand in hand. We try to keep, let's not fail several different criteria, but maybe combine them. So I would probably just fail for the complex images and say that the client needs to add some descriptions for each specific section. So let's look at some other tests. Um, I'm going to exit out of the dev tools for a minute and yeah. So the next thing I'm going to test, first we'll do the automated checks, and it looks like it's getting flagged for minimum contrast. Oh, that is the wrong section. Never mind. All right. So the other good thing about or good thing to keep in mind whenever you're doing an auditing is that not all contrast failures will pop up with the automated scanner. The automated scanner tends to focus on just text. So like right now, it is not picking up that the contrast. There is probably a contrast failure for the non-active portions of this image, but also just from past experience, white text on lime green tends to not reach contrast ratio or the sufficient contrast ratios. But yes, this is the right one. Okay. Okay. All right. So let's see if this is keyboard navigable. So let's find focus here. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my helper and see. Okay. So we're starting a little bit. All right. So it does look like the image itself is not keyboard accessible. So a keyboard user cannot access this. So that would be an additional failure is you want to make sure that interactive components are able to be used with a keyboard. So that's definitely something to look into. So we would add a failure for that one. Um, and can't really tell if there's keyboard traps because it's cannot be accessed with a keyboard. So one thing that I tend to hop around with when I'm doing audits. So if I note something that is going to impact a lot of other things. So like the fact that this is not keyboard accessible means that um, I can't test for focus because that is not going to necessarily pop up as well. So these are things that I tend to flip around a lot in the different tests whenever I am doing that. So just looking at, let's check out headings because that's typically what I test next is for headings. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight. So it does look like, and that is excellent, is that each section is going to have a heading and we can refresh to make sure that, yep, this is looking good. So headings, we do have it defined, which is very good. Okay, so we've already got the keyboard failure. Let's go ahead and look at some contrast so I can kind of show you some of the things that we all test for. Um, so each of these would, and let me pull up the contrast checker. So as Ben said earlier, for text, we're looking for the 4.5 to 1 contrast ratio, and for UI components and states, you're looking for 3 to 1. So let's go ahead and, all right, so we've got the white text, and let's see how that goes up against this This is another slight disadvantage is can't necessarily. All right, so that looks like it's a 1.52 to 1 contrast ratio. So that is definitely failing for text and also for the state. So let's go ahead and test it with it being in an active state. So the way I typically progress whenever doing contrast is test for text first, because that's one of the easiest ways to do it, or the not the easiest, but it's my starting point anyway. Um, and then start working on graphics, because another thing to consider is like, okay, for this image, if this was just an image as itself, um, that icon would be decorative. So that doesn't necessarily have to meet the contrast ratio. But you definitely want your text to be, and you also kind of want the um, outer area to be meeting contrast ratios. So you kind of have to do when you're doing the image function test. This is a bit more complex because it is a complex image, which means there are decorative elements within it, but it's also an interactive component. So it's definitely something that it would take me a little bit longer to really dive deep into everything. But since we're trying to keep this to a a short session, let's just focus on that. So it does look like when it's in its active state, the text does meet the correct contrast ratio. And so you would go around and start testing all of them within that active state and also within um, the non-active state. I am going to show you a trick that actually Mark shared with me. So if you open up the dev tools and then you hit this button here, you can actually look at contrast ratios for at least text. It doesn't work for UI components, but for text, if you hover over a text like a line of text like this, then it gives you that contrast ratio, and also it gives you the um, hex code for it, so you can if because another thing, whenever I'm running up failures for clients, I always make sure that I include the different colors that I've identified with the contrast tool or using this method, just so that they are aware. And also, if they need to search for something or change it within their CSS, it's a little bit easier to do. But another good thing about our contrast checker is that we do have, it's not just text codes. You can use RBG and HSL levels. Yes. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. So doing other quick checks, it does look like all of the text within this uh, component is looking good. But another thing would be to definitely go back and check every single one, because it does look like the headings have different colors. Like I would definitely want to check this guy. And let's see if it is meeting. It is not. So that is definitely another failure that you would add for text contrast. And definitely include the hex code as well as the background color. So let's continue looking and see if any other ones kind of jump out. Let's double check this guy too. Okay, so that's another one. So it's kind of systematically going through, and since it's a wheel, that's super easy. Just go clockwise or counterclockwise, whichever one you want to do. And you want to definitely check um, not only the text down here, but also start using the contrast checker and make sure that this white text on whatever these background colors are. And I would definitely recommend to the client to make the non-hovered states a darker ratio, because if a person is colorblind or has a high contrast on their screen, they may not be able to read this text without mousing over. The other thing is definitely check out the keyboard navigation. Let's look at name rule value for a minute because I think that is the other major thing that would be flagged for this component. So since these sections are acting as buttons, I would definitely be looking for that. Oh, and the inspect tool is already up. Now, the other thing is since this is an SVG, and me personally, I have not done quite so interactive a component. I have used hotspots before with SVGs, and that's very complicated. But the key point that I would like to discuss with the client, and I'll probably end up discussing this with our other specialists as well, because this is definitely something new that we can all benefit from looking at, as well as kind of discussing best solutions to make sure that this is accessible to everybody, is how do you effectively make an SVG interactive by adding the roles of buttons since it does change the content, and also like which aria um, is needed. So like probably this is going to need an aria selected to show which one is within the wheel is, currently viewing the text and heading. So that's definitely something. I don't think it's going to pop up on our scanner. But we also we love doing these kinds of components because it's a new adventure for us to look at and definitely to start, exploring, okay, this is something new. How do we make sure that this is accessible and is it possible? So I'm not seeing our scanner picking up, but again, this is a very native element and it's very cool. I do want to point that out. And
Thank you, Hope.
should we use tabs patterns for that type of component? That would definitely be something that to consider. Um, I mean, that's part of what we do whenever we're collaborating on it is, okay, would tabs work best, or should we just do, kind of a disclosure button for each of those sections? And also we'd have to work with the client to make sure that, it's possible for them, as well as not taking away from the component. So one thing with tabs, while I think that could work, I would definitely want to test it out before recommending it to the client. And we do, or at least I do when I'm auditing. If I have a spare minute, I will definitely play around with the code and see if that is a viable option.